Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Niord again. This is, of course, the Dockyard over this Christmas, and it's a very fun battleship. We looked at the Carl Johan the other day and concluded they play rather similar. So now that I've had a few more weeks to actually play this thing, I've got some more thoughts. I think it's a very, very fun ship, but there's some compromises here, certainly. I think this lack of hydro is a key weak point. When I see a Libertad at 6 kilometers, all these enemy ships at such close range, I just want to push in and torp them out. Libertad, of course, incredibly powerful, but it doesn't have torps, doesn't have a hydro, so getting up close like this, while we still have a lot of HP, can be a great way to take them out. Timing our push around this island, really, really fun to play like this. Yet, no hydro is a massive weak point here. There's a Shimakaze on our flank. We have no idea if there are torps coming. Zao encounter. We don't know if there are torps on our broadside or from our bow that we could be possibly avoiding. Will you take out the Libertad? Feels very good to torp them out like that at such close range. But now we're in a bit of trouble here. Notice how I didn't launch all of my torpedoes. Unlike the Carl Johan, which has the insane torpedo reload, this one does take a little bit longer. Yes, you do get 5 torps per launch instead of 4, but it does mean in situations like this, we're not going to be reloading our torps by the time we get to the next ship. So we're trying to time it out for 1 torp launch per ship. The Zao dodges, of course, and it seems like we're in hydro range of something, so probably those were spotted. Zao now has terrible torpedo angles. Not for long, by the way. Good thing this isn't the upcoming buffed Zao next update. So we get to torp him out, and his angles are bad enough, at least right now, at the time of filming, that I could get away with that. Unfortunately, I'm now very broadside to everyone else. So even if we had a hydro, I don't survive here. Possibly there was a way with a hydro I'm able to turn in a little faster, knowing there's no Zao torps coming, perhaps. That knowledge is very useful. But a very fun brawling push like that is the bread and butter of a Niord. It's not brawling with secondaries, it is brawling with torpedoes and your main guns. Yes, the guns are much better on the Niord than the Carl Johan. I find these Tirpitz guns to be reasonably reliable. Not completely, of course. They are battleship dispersion after all. But the 1.9 Sigma and especially this amazing reload. 21-second reload on these guns puts it the fastest of all tier 9 battleships that have battleship guns. Yes, there is an Illinois that does exist, I'm aware. But with battleship guns, this is the fastest reload at tier 9. 21 seconds is immense. And it allows us to take reload mod and get that down to like 18 seconds. Crazy levels of reload here on this ship. And we're not as compromised like a battle cruiser might on the armor and tankiness department. We can take things like fire prevention. Battle cruisers cannot. We have 32 mil bow and stern plating, allowing us to auto bounce most battleship shells that we'll be facing. So we're a proper battleship here that does have that fast battle cruiser-esque reload. And that's really, really fun to play around with. These torpedoes are also just a blast, being 15 kilometers. I concluded that oftentimes the faster reload is more fun on the Carl Johan, but in situations like this where people are playing a little further back, you're going to often find yourself, people are 15 plus kilometers away from you. Johan will not be able to get its torps out that far, where Niord can. You're going to notice throughout this video, there's just random torps that we're launching out into choke points, into common lanes that people will be sailing through. And we're just going to land torp hit after torp hit. I'm not great with torps, of course, but this is really, really fun to just mess around with, dumping torps out as they are loaded. It's a bit of that Benham spin to win playstyle, while still having a solid battleship firepower here. The HP pool, of course, is a bit of a weak point, right? We are 10,000 HP down. But this heal, I think, makes up for it. This heal is healing back 16.8% of your HP, where the standard heals we usually see, and Johan gets this as well, heals you back 14%. That's a minor difference, but each heal is a little beefier. Notice almost 15,000 HP per heal in this case. The other nice thing about it is it comes back every 60 seconds, not the standard 80 seconds like we'll see on the Johan. That's not as fast as something like a Georgia, the Massachusetts, Ohio, those ships that have that 40-second heal cooldown. But 60 seconds is noticeable. Not only do we get more back, but it is a heal that recharges quicker. Just minor things, but it is very nice to help you stay alive. Yes, your concealment is a bit worse, but I think the torp range is there to make up for that. And like I mentioned already, the passive way games are played these days lends itself to that extra 1.5 kilometers of torpedo range being quite useful, surprisingly so. I found a lot of torpedoes where just barely hitting a target as they were leaving that range. Otherwise, Johan with its 13.5 probably wouldn't be able to land it. The AA is slightly worse, as well as those secondaries. I talked about that in the initial video, but as I've played these things, the more I've played them over the last weeks or so, it really is a ship, both of these ships, Niord and Carl Johan, that should not really be focused on secondaries. It's very obvious with Niord, just because you don't get those casemate secondaries, but even on Johan, it's just so much better when you play this as a torp-focused brawler, where it's main guns and your torps. That's what you're going for here. And I think that's really fun. Sharnor's here, pushing in, and surprise, surprise, 15-kilometer torps, man. And they go so fast, too. It's just fun. It really is. 86-knot torpedoes at that range. Sure, they don't deal that much damage, but it is nice. It is really fun. It's a very different playstyle. And that's what I really look for in premiums as far as a value proposition. Are they strong? Are they good at grinding credits? Tier 9s, of course, very good at grinding credits. So that's one metric I will use to see if it's worth picking up or worth grinding for. The other one, of course, is it unique? Once you have a few premiums, you probably have one that's your favorite for grinding credits. So then at that point, is it worth picking up another premium? Is less to do with how powerful or how good it is at grinding credits, because you already have that ship in your mind. Whatever it is for you, I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about for you. But then, is this ship unique enough to be worth getting regardless? That's the other kind of criteria I'm looking for. And if you have one of them, as I mentioned at the end of the Johan video, finishing off Sharn 43 with more random torps. It's so funny, man. Every time you land torps in this thing, it's just hilarious because it's so far away a lot of the time. People just don't expect it. Maybe they will eventually, but they just don't now these days. But I did mention that in the Johan video. If you have one, you probably don't need the other. They play very similarly. Personally, I gotta say, I do prefer the Niord for its better AP main guns. I think the AP here is much, much better. The higher pen values certainly help us out a lot, and the faster reload, the better turret angles as well are a key benefit on the Niord. But I got something wrong. I didn't notice it, and I had to check. I noticed it while playing it this most recent time, that the rear turret does not have the best firing angles. Notice in that last salvo, I did not fire my rear turret. It took me a while to notice this, and I had to go back and check my earlier video and footage to see if this was something that was changed on release. But no, in that video as well, that rear turret has a much, much worse firing angle. So I'm over here praising the firing angles, the 360-degree rear turret, when you have to give 33, 35 degrees of broadside to actually fire that rear turret, at least when pushing forward. So 360 turret's nice, but it is something to be aware of. That rear turret is quite a bit worse than the rest of your armaments. Both torpedoes and the rest of your main guns have much, much better turret angles. But kiting, of course, your front two turrets have those amazing angles looking backwards. So it is a ship, both of them, to be honest with you, but even more so, Niord is a ship that wants people to push into it. You want to be in front of an enemy push and just wiggling back and forth, launching torp spread from either side as they get reloaded. Pushing it can do, but the lack of hydro, and I think also this poor firing angle of this rear gun, certainly leads me to believe that it is much better off kiting an enemy push than you are pushing in. It still can do it, but it's much more comfortable to be kiting the enemy team. And we get ourselves a Citadel there on the Renown 44. Finally, a little bit hit and miss these guns, a little bit of RNG you got to deal with, but I think they're still good enough. Certainly with this nice concealment, nowhere near as good as Johan, but nice concealment, good speed, allows you to get around the map and flank the enemy. Torpedo salvos are always going to be more devastating when you're on the broadsides. When you're torping bow 1, there's a lot of RNG in whether or not you get hits or not at all. But anytime you're on broadsides, you're probably going to get many more hits. It's just more consistent. Main guns as well. You don't have a lot of overmatched Tirpitz guns, 380s. Very little overmatch for tier 9. So we're really focusing on finding weak points in the enemy formation and really trying to fish for broadside shots. I know every battleship wants to do that, but certainly Niord and Johan, both with smaller caliber guns, really need to be doing that. We get ourselves a Kraken in this game. Feels very good at just kind of dancing around in the B cap here. There was an Azashio. There's some scary torp threats here. Fortunately, A-Gear pushes in with his Hydro, so we do spot them and we can avoid them. Otherwise, that would have been a little scary. I'm going to keep bringing it up because no Hydro is a massive weak point if you're a brawling ship or even a mid to close range ship like this one is that really needs to know where those torps are. We don't have a lot of HP to start out with. Anytime you're taking torpedo damage, that is much more permanent. You're not healing that back nearly as easily as pen damage or certainly not any of that fires, for example. Those are really healable. That Citadel repair is at 10%, and oftentimes torpedoes, when they hit you on your belt armor, bow and stern's a little different, but when they hit you in the midsection, those torps, they count as Citadel damage. That's why you're not healing very much of that back at all. Lepanto actually takes 10k there somehow, and I was a little surprised by that because it looked like all those torpedoes bounced. And yes, this is an arms race game, but people tend to push in those. That's often where you're going to have your best games, at least in random battles. I had a tough time, I'm not going to lie. I had a tough time playing Niord. I had a tough time playing a lot of ships this update. I'm sure you can see that as well in your own games, that it's been a little bit rough over Christmas as far as the matchmaker is concerned. So seeing Niord perform well at these mid to close ranges leads me to believe if you're playing a lot of ranked game modes, brawl game modes, asymmetric perhaps, mode shuffle, this ship is going to be even more fun in those game modes. It's really good in those situations. Randoms, it can be quite difficult because you do have to get a little bit closer mid-range and flanking the enemy to really find yourself having those excellent games. Notice our torps actually miss or didn't have enough range, more likely, on that enemy Lepanto. 15 kilometers is a lot of range, yet we don't quite have the range to reach that corner, at least from where we launched them. So you do still have to push up a little bit. Most of the time that's going to be fine, but in some cases you'll push out and suddenly everybody shows up on your broadside. Very fortunate to not take more damage there. Yes, this Citadel is waterline to kind of below waterline. It's close, but you can take some massive hits. Certainly with the lower HP pool, you're going to feel that much more as well. So taking many smaller hits, fire damage, that kind of thing is definitely better for this ship, at least when it's tanking. Notice I couldn't even find where I had finished off that mini Gumo. Launch the torps, forget about them, suddenly get a dev strike on a DD. It's so funny, man. It really is. Just send them into major choke points. Areas where enemy teams will probably be pushing or traversing the map through. A lot of the times when I'm playing this game, I'm telling you guys, don't push enemy spawns. Reposition, try to get back towards the other side of the map instead of following the enemy team into their spawn. We're not doing amazing on this flank. We're doing all right. But if the enemy team decides to transition back towards the middle of the map, the other side of the map, they're probably, if they were on the 9-10 line, going to be crossing that 7-line gap where we launched those torpedoes. I'm not going to get torps here. I'm not foreshadowing this. I'm not that good. But it is an example. I just want to show you as an option or a reason to send the torps out, even if it looks like there really isn't that many people who are going to be hit by those torpedoes. Even if there's not someone directly to be hit, it can still be worthwhile to launch these torpedoes. A great example of why you really don't want to push spawn can be seen right here in the enemy team. They actually have complete control over the Thunderdome here. We're trying to push back middle to help our teammates and come back from our flank on the 7, 8, 9, 10 lines, coming back to the middle, helping our teammates. This is how we want to play. It's a lot riskier to push enemy spawns because you push out of your good cover and oftentimes will be caught in a crossfire. And the enemy team is seeing that a little bit here. But if they had just pushed into the Thunderdome, held on to that, our middle push here either just wouldn't have happened because we would have realized that we're getting into a crossfire with the remainder enemy team down in the south. But if we had tried it anyway, well, we would have been in that crossfire, and they probably would have done a lot better. Sent out those random torps yet again, hoping for hits, not necessarily guaranteed hits, but hoping for them. Baltimore here turning around, realizing, yeah, some of his teammates are evaporating just a little bit. He's probably going to go broadside, so hold, wait for it. Send the salvo out. The dispersion actually looks okay, I would say. When we zoom back in, we get 6 hits for 10,000 damage, but no Citadel. The guns are fine. They are fine. I'm not going to complain about them because they have certainly performed, but they mostly are going to do what you think. But every once in a while, you get let down just a little bit. Hit another random torp there. I think that was maybe on Lepanto. There we go. That parting shot, there's the Citadel. We found it. It's still 8 guns. 1.9 Sigma, Battleship Dispersion, 8 guns. It's fine, but certainly not what I would call pinpoint accurate or anything like that. The ship has other strengths that are making up for that lack of caliber. Certainly the reload is one, but these torpedoes as well. Launching them because Siegfried is within torpedo range. 15 kilometers is massive for a torp range, especially on a battleship. Really haven't seen this all that often. When we do see torps on battleships, either it's the short range bursty torps like Tirpitz might have, right? Those 6-kilometer torps, or maybe a 10 or 12 kilometer, 12 and a half kilometer like we saw on the Schlieffen line. 15 is pretty funny. It is enough to be much more useful than a lot of the other torpedoes on other battleships. It's really, really nice. As soon as Siegfried angles, though, notice how our damage just drops off a cliff. I really want to highlight this at the end of the game here, as we're shooting at targets that are angling perfectly to us, for the most part. And just notice how little damage we're going to be doing. We do have quite a few arms race buffs. We got a damage buff, got multiple reload buffs. We're still really not going to do that much damage to these people because we don't have overmatch for the cruisers. And of course, battleships, well, they are going to bounce your shells anyway. We can aim for the superstructure, sure, but it is something to be a little bit concerned about. You don't want to be positioning your ship in a stationary way when everybody knows where you are, and they're likely going to angle to you. In this case, our teammates are getting crossfires, which is good, certainly, but you do need to be repositioning in this thing. And you can, thanks to the concealment as well as this nice speed. Torpedo tube permanently destroyed. It happened a little bit ago now, but still, I do need to bring that up as well. This is a German hull. This is a Ruprecht hull with better armor, but it is a Ruprecht hull, which means your torps are very exposed on your deck. And they can be permanently destroyed. Not very often, but certainly often enough to be annoying. Certainly as this is your secondary armament. You want to keep them alive. It's very important to keep them alive for the fun playstyle of the ship, as well as just the ship's overall power level, I would say. So using the main armaments upgrade mod 1, slot 1, I think, is important here. No secondaries means there's really no incentive to be running the secondary upgrades as far as the turret HP on the secondaries. So that's going to get us quite a lot more survivability. On this one, notice I haven't really been shooting a lot of HE. Maybe I should. I probably should here, especially as Siegfried is angling to us. The HE is really not too bad either, but lack of shell volume means I'd rather just go for those broadside shots, get those AP salvos. It's got 95 mil pen. It's like that quarter pen that we see on German ships. These are kind of German guns, and they have a 34% fire chance. The Johan still is much better at spamming HE, if you're interested in doing that, but you can do it here, and I'm probably making a mistake by not actually shooting HE at this Siegfried. When there's broadside options, though, of course, we do want to stay on the AP. That can be a bit of a problem when it comes to building this ship, though. Do we take preventative maintenance, which is a 1-point skill that helps keep our torpedo tubes alive? Or do we take gunfeeder, which helps us to swap between ammo types and always using the correct ammunition? It can be tricky to know which one to take. Usually I am taking preventative maintenance because I'm a bit of a sucker for that AP damage, maybe a little too greedy for those Dev Strike salvos, and I want to keep the torpedoes alive. So you know, maybe not the best build in that case, but I know how I play. I know my shortcomings there as far as playing optimally. A little too greedy in a lot of situations. But it does mean more often it will keep the torpedo tubes alive, which is a lot of the fun of this ship. Although 15,000 damage, that is 2 of the alpha damage upgrades at this point. But still, 15k into a superstructure? Every once in a while, man. It just shows up. Fortunately, our teammates are here to help us out as well. Tu-16 is decent damage. It is arms race though, so a little bit inflated there. And Dev Strike on a DD first blood with the torpedoes. Just silly. Just silly. It's a lot of fun to play either one of these ships, Niord or Johan. So I would recommend trying to get one of them eventually if you're interested in brawling battleships at all. It's very different to play around torps instead of secondaries as your alternative armament. Even though I really like these ships and I think they're quite fun, I do recognize they are not cheap to get. Certainly the Johan is an over 19,000 doubloon premium ship. That is expensive. And while Niord is in the dockyard, and theoretically you can get it for, what, 5,000 doubloons if you get the first starter pack, just enough to finish the whole dockyard. We've already seen that this ship has some missions at the end, particularly one that is a little bit difficult to accomplish. So I'd probably see this as a minimum 8,000 doubloon ship, including playing consistently over the Christmas update, which again is not bad either. I would highly recommend not buying those early access things, the FOMO things. It's going to keep you really locked in and trying to get this ship, and then you're going to feel really bad if you don't get to it at the end. Christmas is a busy season for a lot of people. I'd recommend waiting and then seeing where you get to at the end of the dockyard. It's 1,000 doubloon discount for getting that starter pack versus not. So I think the peace of mind of not feeling like you're locked in at the beginning is worth 1,000 doubloons. Whether or not that's true for you, that's up to you to decide. But I really don't like some of these FOMO mechanics, these kind of psychological tactics to get you to spend a little bit more over time in this game. So just thought I'd mention that, but these are both very fun. I do want to mention the monetization aspect a bit too, but they're very fun battleships, I think. Tier 9 means a bit rough on the matchmaker side of things, of course. But that's true for all tier 9s, tier 8s as well. It's hard these days playing these ships that are high tier, but not the full power level of tier 10 and certainly super ships as well. It can be a little bit rough, certainly, to play this thing, but it's very fun. 18.5 second reload, pretty reasonably accurate, consistent main guns, smaller HP pool, but buffed heal to compensate for that. Rather quick to get around the map, decent maneuverability, solid concealment, and of course, these 15-kilometer torpedoes are just a blast to play around with. As for the build, I've gone all sorts of different directions here. I'm being a little bit greedy for super heavy AP. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Certainly taking things like Grease the Gears can be good. Also, running basic survivability could be a good option to deal with those fires. Notice here I'm taking preventive maintenance, trying to keep those torps alive, as I mentioned. But Gunfeeder could be very useful. The HE's not bad. By no means. It's not bad. Decent alpha damage, decent fire chance, good pen. And the reload here is still very, very good. I just find myself not enjoying shooting HE out of my battleships. I want to be thinking about where I can reposition to get better torp and gun salvos off on people. Find their broadsides, that kind of thing. So that's what I would be going for. A little bit of a greedy commander build, but that is what I would do. I should show you guys the... how do I get there? Nope. How do I use the port? It's so confusing. There we go. The armor as well. We did look at this already, but sure, it is nice to have 32 millimeters of armor here on a Ruprecht hull. This is usually overmatchable on Ruprecht by battleships, so it's nice to see here that is fully armored up, 32 millimeters. 32 mil deck armor, though, means HE spam can take you out. At closer ranges, you notice your armor gets much better. Flatter shell arcs means they're hitting here. Some shot traps for AP, though. Notice when you're kiting especially, some shot traps, so something to be aware of. But given the way this rear turret angle works and the lack of hydro, I still think you generally want to be kiting with this thing. But that's it for the updated look at the Niord. Always trying to do the first impressions. Don't get a full picture of the ship until I've played it for a few weeks. And after playing it a couple weeks here, I gotta say, it is a very fun ship. Yes, Christmas matchmaker, tier 9 matchmaker, it is compromised, but that's not necessarily this ship's fault. I think it's a solid tier 9 premium, worth grinding for in the dockyard, but that monetization at the end, that's for you to decide if it's worth it or not. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.